You will not believe what happens to the girl at the end. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue writing stories like this one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
Dusty Gulch and the Wildflower Sisters. Dusty Gulch lived up to its name. A perpetual haze of ochre hung in the air, clinging to the rough-hewn buildings and coating everything in a fine layer of grit. The wind, a constant companion, whipped dust devils through the narrow streets, scattering refuse and stinging the eyes. Men, hardened by the relentless pursuit of gold and the unforgiving landscape, spat tobacco juice and cursed at stray dogs. Hope, like water, was a precious and scarce commodity. Amidst this harsh reality, a splash of vibrant color offered a fleeting respite. Lily, Daisy, and Rose, the Wildflower Sisters as they were known, stood in the town square, their small stall a riot of blues, yellows, and reds. Lily, the eldest at 13, her face framed by a cascade of auburn braids, arranged the bouquets with practiced hands. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her gaze darting warily across the faces of the passers-by. At 9, Daisy, with her sun-kissed cheeks and mischievous grin, possessed a charm that could melt the stoniest heart. She hawked their wares with a sing-song voice, her words weaving a tapestry of floral enchantment. Rose, the youngest at 6, a miniature version of Lily with wide, innocent eyes, clutched a posy of purple lupins, offering it shyly to anyone who made eye contact. Finest wildflowers this side of the Rockies. Daisy chirped, her voice cutting through the din of the saloon and the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Guaranteed to brighten your day or your money back. A grizzled miner, his face etched with years of toil and disappointment, paused before their stall. He eyed the flowers with suspicion, then glanced at the sisters, his gaze lingering a moment too long on Rose. Lily stiffened, her hand instinctively moving to shield her youngest sister. "What'll these cost me, little lady?" the miner rasped, his voice like gravel. Lily forced a smile. "Depends on the bouquet, sir. That one Rose is holding is a nickel." The miner grunted, pulling a coin from his pocket. He tossed it carelessly onto the stall. "Keep the change, darlin'. For luck." He snatched the lupins from Rose's hand, his fingers brushing against hers. Rose flinched, burying her face in Lily's skirt. Lily's heart pounded in her chest. She hated these encounters, the leering eyes, the heavy hands. But they needed the money. It was the only way they survived. She offered a curt nod to the miner, her eyes conveying a silent warning. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty streets, Lily began to pack up their unsold flowers. Daisy, ever the optimist, counted their meager earnings, her brow furrowing slightly. "Not much today," she sighed. "Barely enough for beans and bread." "It's enough," Lily said firmly, her voice brooking no argument. "We'll make it work like we always do." Their home was a small, dilapidated shack on the outskirts of town, its walls patched with rags and its roof riddled with holes. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and wood smoke. A single, sputtering candle illuminated their meager possessions, a worn-out blanket, a chipped enamel pot, and a handful of tattered storybooks. Despite the hardships, there was a sense of warmth and love within those crumbling walls. Rose, nestled between her sisters, listened intently as Lily read aloud from a dog-eared copy of Cinderella, her voice soft and soothing. Daisy, ever practical, mended a tear in Lily's dress, her nimble fingers working with surprising dexterity. Before sleep, huddled together for warmth, Daisy spoke, her voice unusually subdued. "Lily, do you ever think about finding someone? Someone to take care of us?" Lily paused, her gaze fixed on the flickering candlelight. She had thought about it, of course. Every day. A longing for a safe, secure home gnawed at her. But trust was a dangerous thing in Dusty Gulch, a lesson she had learned the hard way. "We have each other," she said finally, her voice tight. "That's all that matters." Daisy didn't press the issue. She knew better than to challenge Lily's resolve. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help but dream of a different life, a life free from the dust and the danger, a life where they didn't have to constantly worry about their next meal. A life where they could simply be sisters, loved and protected. Lily, however, lay awake long after her sisters had fallen asleep, her mind racing with worry. She was their protector, their provider, their everything. And she would do whatever it took to keep them safe, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. She had seen the darkness in men's eyes, and it terrified her. She vowed to protect her sisters from that darkness, even if it meant remaining forever alone in the dusty, unforgiving world of Dusty Gulch. She blew out the candle, shrouding them in darkness, but the weight of her responsibilities felt heavier than ever. The cruel bargain. The dust tasted like despair. Lily coughed, pulling her threadbare shawl tighter around Daisy and Rose. The meager pile of coins in her pocket wouldn't buy them supper, let alone another night in the drafty lean-to they called home. Desperation gnawed at her, a constant, unwelcome companion. That's when Jebediah appeared, a weasel of a man with eyes that darted like frightened mice. He always smelled of stale whiskey and false promises. Lily stiffened, pulling her sisters closer. "Well now, ain't this a pretty sight?" he crooned, his voice oily smooth. "Such lovely young uns wasting away in this dust heap." Lily didn't respond, her gaze fixed on his hands. She'd learned long ago to watch hands, they betrayed intentions quicker than words. Jebediah chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "I got an offer for you, little lady. A real opportunity." He gestured vaguely towards the bustling heart of Dusty Gulch. "See those fellas? Miners, they are. Lonely, hard-working men. They need companionship. Someone to cook a meal, mend their clothes, maybe even read them a story." Lily's stomach churned. She knew what companionship meant in this town. Her grip tightened on Daisy's hand almost painfully. "I ain't selling myself," she spat, the words bitter on her tongue. Jebediah raised his hands in mock surrender. Now, hold your horses. Ain't talking about selling. Talking about placing. Finding good homes for you and your sisters. Homes where you'll be fed, clothed, and safe." Daisy, ever the optimist, piped up. "Safe? You mean no more sleeping on the ground?" Jebediah's smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth. "Exactly, little darling. A real bed, a warm fire, maybe even toys." Rose's eyes lit up at the mention of toys. She hadn't owned one since, well, Lily couldn't even remember. Lily remained skeptical. Jebediah's kindness was a venomous snake disguised as a flower. "What's the catch?" "No catch, child, just a little arrangement. These miners, they're good men, but they're particular. They each have different needs. So, you girls might have to separate." The word hit Lily like a punch to the gut. Separate? The thought was unbearable. They were all they had. "No," she cried, her voice cracking. "We stay together. Always." Jebediah sighed, a show of exaggerated patience. "Now, Lily, be reasonable. This is about your sister's well-being. Don't you want them to have a better life? A life away from this squalor." He gestured around them, taking in their tattered clothes and the grimy streets. "Think about it, girl. Think about your sisters." He left them then, the dust swirling around his retreating figure. Lily looked at Daisy and Rose, their hopeful faces a painful reminder of her responsibility. Could she condemn them to a life of poverty and hardship out of her own fear? The decision tore at her. She paced, the weight of it crushing her young shoulders. She knew Jebediah wasn't to be trusted, but the alternative was bleak. They were starving, vulnerable. Finally, with a heart heavier than any gold nugget, she made her choice. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay, we'll do it." Jebediah returned at dusk, his eyes gleaming with triumph. He led them to a group of men, rough and weathered, their faces etched with the harshness of the gold rush. Each man looked them over, assessing them like livestock. Lily felt a wave of nausea. "This one's mine," a gruff voice boomed, and a man with a scarred face and calloused hands stepped forward. He grabbed Daisy's arm, pulling her away. Daisy cried out, reaching for Lily. "Lily, don't let him take me." Lily lunged forward, but Jebediah grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Now, Lily. Remember the bargain." Another man, shorter and thinner, with nervous eyes, claimed Rose. Rose clung to Lily's skirt, sobbing. "I want to stay with you, Lily. I'm scared." Lily's vision blurred with tears. She tried to reach for them, but Jebediah held her fast. The miners led her sisters away, their small figures disappearing into the throng of people. Lily screamed, a raw, primal sound of despair. "Daisy! Rose!" No, but her cries were lost in the cacophony of Dusty Gulch. She was alone, utterly, devastatingly alone. Jebediah released her, a smirk playing on his lips. "Best get used to it, girl," he said, and then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Lives of labor. The cabin stank of stale pipe smoke and neglected laundry. Lily's nose wrinkled instinctively as she assaulted the grime-caked floor with a vinegar-soaked rag, the acidic scent a feeble attempt to mask the pervasive stench. Her jailer, Old Man Hemlock, a gnarled figure with eyes like polished obsidian, sat motionless by the dying fire, scrutinizing her every action. Since Jebediah had deposited her on his doorstep, he'd offered nothing but gruff silence and a pointed finger towards the neglected chores. The harsh light had rendered her hands raw, the skin splitting and bleeding. She yearned for the silken touch of Daisy's hair, the familiar reassurance of Rose nestled beside her during sleepless nights. Now, a soul-deep solitude pressed down on her, heavy as a shroud. A dry, gravelly cough tore from Hemlock's chest, echoing in the cramped space. "Grub better be ready directly," he croaked, shattering the silence. Lily's stomach churned. Her last sustenance had been a shard of stale hardtack pilfered from a nearly empty bin. "Yes, sir," she mumbled, forcing the corners of her mouth upward. A practiced, albeit hollow, smile was a better defense than inviting his wrath. She stirred the simmering pot of beans, adding a meager handful of dried onions unearthed from a shadowy corner. A paltry offering, but all she possessed. Her thoughts drifted westward, carried on the wind to her sisters. Were they warm? Were they satiated? Were they treated with decency? A painful knot tightened in her throat. Miles away, Daisy's mouth felt like dust. The sun blazed relentlessly, transforming the parched creek bed into a shimmering mirage. Her flimsy dress clung to her body, saturated with sweat. The two buckets, brimming and precarious, threatened to overbalance her as she stumbled across the rough terrain. "Move it, girl." Kruger's voice, a rasp like sandpaper, scraped across the air. A cadaverous man, consumed by gold fever, his bloodshot eyes darted ceaselessly towards the ground as if expecting to unearth a fortune in glittering nuggets. Her arms throbbed, each muscle screaming in rebellion. She longed to pause, to steal a moment's respite, but knew better. Kruger's temper flared with the unpredictability of lightning. She'd witnessed him abuse his mule for the slightest hesitation. So she continued, each step a defiance against the scorching earth and the crushing weight. She conjured Lily's image, her legendary resilience, and drew strength from the memory. She envisioned Lily extending a hand, pulling her onward, urging her towards fortitude. This spectral vision, faint but unwavering, was her only shield against collapse. Confined within a stifling, poorly lit tent, Rose's finger throbbed, pricked again by the persistent needle. The coarse canvas of a miner's trousers resisted her efforts, each stitch a sharp reminder of her isolation. Silas, a hulking figure carved from granite, sat opposite, honing his blade with slow, deliberate strokes. The metallic screech resonated within the tent, amplifying the oppressive atmosphere. He hadn't addressed her directly, merely pointed to the mountain of tattered clothing with a grunt. "Mend it." Rose suspected he viewed her as less than human, an uncomplaining automaton for repairing damaged garments. She missed the comforting murmur of her sisters' voices, the shared tales whispered under the cloak of night, the soothing cadence of their combined breaths. Here, silence was a suffocating weight, broken only by the rasping of Silas's blade and the occasional snort. Tears pricked at her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked them back, knowing any hint of vulnerability would incite his disdain. She concentrated on her task, her nimble fingers moving with unwavering focus. Each stitch became a silent prayer, a desperate plea for rescue, for reunion. She quelled the swelling tide of despair, clinging desperately to the hope that someday, somehow, they would reclaim their family. That night, as Lily lay on the tick-filled straw pallet in the corner of Hemlock's cabin, she fixed her gaze on the cracks lacerating the ceiling, tracing their chaotic paths with her mind. The fire had dwindled to embers, plunging the room into near-total darkness, save for slivers of moonlight penetrating the grimy windowpane. She breathed a promise into the vastness, a vow to locate her sisters regardless of the cost. She refused to let them be consumed by this merciless world. She would find them and their fractured family would be whole once more. Hope, a fragile spark, flickered in the shadows, enough to fuel her resolve. Whispers on the wind. The air tasted of resin and turned earth as Walks-with-Wind drew back his bowstring. Sunlight, filtered through the dense canopy, splashed the ground in shifting patterns. Across the clearing, Swift Arrow mirrored the motion, his sharp gaze sweeping the wood's edge. Venison would keep their village alive through the deepening winter. Walks-with-Wind relaxed his stance, a prickle of unease raising the hairs on his neck. "What weighs on you, brother?" Swift Arrow murmured. "The atmosphere hangs heavy," Walks-with-Wind murmured, his fingers tracing the familiar curve of his bow. "As if a distant squall is gathering force." Swift Arrow grunted, a sound both noncommittal and respectful. He trusted his brother's intuition. Walks-with-Wind was attuned to the rhythms of the land in ways he could only admire. They resumed their vigil, the forest holding its breath around them save for the sibilant whisper of wind and the chattering scold of a jay. As the sun dipped below the horizon, igniting the clouds with fire, they turned toward Dusty Gulch, a trading post a few leagues distant. There, they hoped to exchange their kill for necessities their own lands couldn't provide. The trading post was a riot of activity. Tents pitched haphazardly, wagons clustered like grazing beasts, and rough-hewn buildings overflowing with humanity. Claim jumpers, hawkers, and vagrants jostled, their voices a raucous chorus of tall tales, grievances, and drunken revelry. Walks-with-Wind and Swift Arrow remained on the periphery, their stoicism eliciting curious glances but little direct interaction. They bartered their prize successfully for salt and tools, then found a quiet spot near a dwindling fire to rest before starting home. It was there, beside the snapping flames, that the overheard snippets pierced through the noise. Two unsavory characters, their faces etched with hard living, were sharing a bottle nearby. Kruger's got himself a new pack animal, one rasped, taking a pull from the bottle. Little thing barely 10 summers. Works her raw at that mine of his. The other cackled. They say Hemlock's got one too. Quiet as a field mouse, but she'll bring a tidy some when she's grown. And Silas, heard he bought a girl as well. Gods only know what he wants her for. A chill snaked down Walkswithwind's spine. He looked at Swift Arrow, his brother's jaw was clenched, his eyes glittering with suppressed rage. Orphans, the first man continued, oblivious. Lost their folks to the sickness. No one to care for them. Easy pickings, the other said with a shrug. The men wandered off, their voices swallowed by the din, but their words clung like burrs. Walkswithwind and Swift Arrow exchanged a silent, weighty look. This Kruger, Walkswithwind said, his voice barely audible. Hemlock. Silas. They are vermin. Swift Arrow spat into the fire. They enslave children, treat them worse than dogs. This is an abomination. Walkswithwind closed his eyes, imagining the faces of the girls, desolate and defenseless. The premonition he'd felt now surged, a storm about to break inside him. We cannot ignore this, brother, he stated, steel in his tone. We must intervene. Swift Arrow nodded, his hand instinctively touching the hilt of his knife. How? Walkswithwind considered the path ahead, gauging the risks and the potential consequences. Two men were hardly an army, but they had allies, those who shared their moral compass. We return to our village, he decided. We will speak with the elders, the warriors. We will summon those willing to champion justice. He met Swift Arrow's gaze, unwavering. These girls may be strangers, but they are children of the Earth Mother. We cannot stand idly by while they are broken. The fire popped, sending embers spiraling into the darkness. The wind sharpened, carrying the scent of pine and the whispers of suffering. Walkswithwind and Swift Arrow stood, resolution hardening their features. The hunt for deer was abandoned. A different, far more dangerous pursuit had begun. A call for courage. The wind clawed at Walkswithwind's hair as he and Swift Arrow spurred their ponies across the windswept plains. Each biting draft carried the tang of approaching winter, a somber clock ticking down for the three orphaned sisters. He caught a glance at his brother. Grim resolve tightened his features, mirroring the urgency in his own heart. Their painted ponies, usually emblems of pride and leisurely hunts, now strained with a desperate mission. They first sought out the silent river band, their camp nestled in a shielded vale where a fragile stream persisted. Their lodges, smaller and more worn than those in his own village, whispered tales of hardship, a constant struggle against the caprices of nature. Children, their faces smudged with earth, paused their games, eyes wide as the brothers approached. Walkswithwind dismounted, approaching the dwelling of Whispering Stones, the village elder whose wisdom was famed among the Cheyenne. He presented tobacco, a token of respect and an entreaty for counsel. Whispering Stones, he began, his voice heavy with purpose, we bear news that chills bone and demands the fortitude of our people. She gestured them into her lodge, the air thick with the comforting aromas of sage and wood smoke. As Walkswithwind related the overheard story from the trading post, the forsaken sisters, the heartless transaction, the bleak destiny looming before them, Whispering Stones listened intently, her eyes, like ancient river stones, locked on his. When he concluded, a heavy silence descended, punctuated only by the snap and hiss of the fire. At last, she spoke, her voice gravelly yet firm. Such barbarity cannot stand. The spirits themselves weep for these babes. She summoned the silent river warriors. As they gathered, curiosity mingled with apprehension on their faces. Walkswithwind reiterated his account. He spoke of sisterly bonds, the sanctity of youth, and the obligation to shield the defenseless. He offered no embellishments, issued no pleas, simply laying bare the unvarnished truth, allowing the gravity of the situation to settle upon them. One by one, men stepped forward, righteous fury burning in their eyes. Tall Elk, a young warrior celebrated for his speed, declared, "These children are Cheyenne. Their blood flows in our veins. We ride with you." Others echoed his sentiment, their voices rising into a defiant chorus. Whispering Stones nodded, her silent approval a benediction. From the silent river camp, they turned westward toward the craggy peaks where the Eagle Feather Band called home. The trek proved arduous, the terrain relentless, yet their swelling ranks and fervent dedication fueled their journey. At each successive camp, Walkswithwind recounted the narrative, vividly depicting the injustice and appealing to the shared values binding the Cheyenne. The Eagle Feather Band, tempered by years of skirmishes with the Crow, greeted them with initial reserve. Scarred Bear, their leader, a veteran of countless conflicts, questioned Walkswithwind intently, suspicion narrowing his gaze. Why risk our lives for those we don't know? He demanded, his voice a rasp. We have our own kin to protect. Walks with Wind met his challenge head-on. They are not unknown. They are our children. And if we fail to safeguard them, who then will guard our own? He then recounted an incident from Scarred Bear's youth when he'd braved a blizzard to rescue a lost child. The tale resonated in the air, a poignant reminder of the compassion residing within the hardened warrior. Scarred Bear remained silent, a slow smile finally breaking across his weathered face. A warrior's heart remembers everything, he stated. We will ride with you. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the plains in long shadows, Walks with Wind surveyed the growing company of warriors. Cheyenne from disparate bands, unified by purpose, their faces illuminated by the dancing firelight. He knew peril awaited, yet they were not alone. They were linked by a shared sense of justice, an unwavering devotion to their people, and a burning resolve to wrest the three sisters from the encroaching darkness. The call to courage had been answered by many. Shadows of Dusty Gulch. The air hung thick and cool, a damp blanket against the skin as the Cheyenne warriors gathered around small fires, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. Walks with Wind watched them, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach despite the resolve that burned within him. He knew the risks. Dusty Gulch was a viper's nest, crawling with men who valued gold more than life, more than justice. One by one, the warriors began to paint their faces. Scarred Bear, his namesake a jagged line across his left eye, daubed charcoal across his brow, a dark stripe that seemed to deepen the intensity of his gaze. Others favored red ochre, swirling patterns that spoke of courage and defiance. Walks with Wind dipped his fingers into the clay pot, tracing a single white line down the center of his face, a symbol of purity and purpose. He would not allow the darkness of Dusty Gulch to stain their souls. He addressed them, his voice low but firm, carrying on the still night air. Brothers, tonight we ride for those who cannot ride for themselves. Three sisters, lost and alone, held captive by greed. We will bring them home. He paused, letting his words sink in. Remember our purpose. We are not here for bloodshed, but for justice. We will use force only when necessary. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Swift Arrow, standing beside Walks with Wind, nodded. He had argued fiercely for a swift, decisive strike, but he trusted his brother's wisdom. He knew Walks with Wind's heart, his unwavering commitment to peace whenever possible. Still, Swift Arrow's hand instinctively went to the handle of his knife, a silent promise of protection. The horses were already saddled, their breath misting in the cool air. As the moon climbed higher, bathing the landscape in an ethereal glow, the warriors mounted. Walks with Wind raised his hand, a signal to move. The horses shifted, their hooves muffled by the soft earth, and they began to move as one, a silent, spectral procession gliding through the shadows. Dusty Gulch lay nestled in a valley, a cluster of ramshackle buildings clinging to the promise of gold. From their vantage point on the ridge, Walks with Wind could see the lights of saloons spilling onto the dusty street, hear the raucous laughter and the clinking of glasses. It was a scene of chaos and debauchery, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of the Cheyenne camp they had left behind. Swift Arrow turned to Walks with Wind, his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. It is time, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I will draw their attention. Walks with Wind nodded. He knew Swift Arrow's plan was risky, but it was their best chance to minimize casualties. Swift Arrow was a master of distraction, a whirlwind of controlled chaos. With a final glance at his brother, Swift Arrow spurred his horse forward, disappearing into the darkness. A few moments later, the sharp crack of gunfire echoed through the valley, followed by shouts and screams. The lights in the saloons flickered and men poured out into the street, their faces contorted with fear and confusion. Walks with Wind took a deep breath. This was it. He raised his hand again, and the warriors surged forward, a silent wave of determination washing down the ridge towards Dusty Gulch. They moved with a purpose, their eyes fixed on their objective, to find the three sisters and bring them home. As they rode, Walks with Wind could hear the escalating chaos in the town below. More gunshots, the shattering of glass, the panicked cries of men. Swift Arrow was doing his job. Now it was their turn. He urged his horse onward, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that the next few hours would determine not only the fate of the three sisters, but also the future of his people. He would not fail them. He could not. The shadows of Dusty Gulch seemed to deepen, to coil around them like grasping hands. But Walks with Wind rode on, his gaze fixed on the flickering lights, his spirit fueled by hope and a fierce determination to bring justice to a lawless land. Sisters of Hope. Hemlock's rasping snores, a percussive drone, permeated the shack's flimsy walls. Lily, rigid on her straw pallet, felt each exhale like a physical blow. The stale aroma of wood smoke insinuated itself through the gaps in the timber, competing with the cloying tang of cheap whiskey and soiled wool. The cacophony of the camp had mellowed, boisterous guffaws were now infrequent mumbles, yielding to the insistent serenade of crickets and the distant lament of a coyote. Yet a deeper vibration pulsed beneath it all, a subtle hum that resonated within her very core. Hope, fragile yet tenacious, warred with trepidation as she pushed herself upright. Barefoot, she ghosted to the wall, pressing her eye to the widest chink. Moonlight painted the scene in shades of silver and ebony. Figures moved with a lithe grace wholly foreign to the rough-and-tumble inhabitants of Dusty Gulch. They were imposing, their faces decorated with bold stripes of ebony and ochre, their long, midnight hair swaying with each silent stride. Cheyenne. Then she recognized him. Set apart, his silhouette a stark outline against the moon's glow. The breadth of his shoulders, the regal carriage of his head, recognition hit her like a physical jolt. Walks with wind. A strangled sob escaped her. He was here. She recoiled, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She had to alert her sisters. But certainty was paramount. Again, she peered through the fissure. Walks with Wind had drawn nearer, his gaze sweeping over the ramshackle dwellings with an intensity that stole her breath. He lifted a hand, silently directing one of the warriors. The figure dissolved into the surrounding gloom, heading toward the path that wound to the creek. Lily knew it well, Daisy's daily trek for the widow Peabody's water. Summoning her courage, Lily breathed his name, her voice a mere thread of sound. Walks with Wind. Silence descended, absolute and profound. Then Walks with Wind pivoted, his gaze unerringly finding the gap in the wall. He approached, his footsteps muffled by the earth. Lily, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Yes, she whispered, relief washing over her in a warm tide. We have come to bring you and your sisters home, he affirmed, his tone resolute. But we require your assistance. Without hesitation, Lily pledged anything. Walks with Wind unveiled his strategy, his words measured and precise. He spoke of swift arrows, planned distraction, the imperative for stealth and speed. He detailed the presence of the warrior awaiting Daisy by the creek. Can you reach Rose? He inquired. Lily nodded. Hemlock slumbers deeply after his whiskey. I can slip away, but it is fraught with peril. We will be vigilant, Walks with Wind assured her. Trust to the shadows, Lily. They are our allies this night. He vanished back into the obscurity. Lily, her thoughts whirling, focused on the task at hand. Elsewhere, near the creek, Daisy plodded along the parched trail, the water-laden buckets biting into her arms. The widow Peabody's relentless demands were a burden heavier than their contents. Tonight, however, something else weighed on her, a delicate ember of hope threatening to ignite. She caught sight of him, a solitary form emerging from the willow thicket fringing the creek. He loomed tall, his visage adorned with tribal paint, his eyes burning with an inner fire. Fear mingled with a burgeoning exhilaration. Could this be? He stepped fully into the moonlight's embrace. Daisy? A gasp escaped her, nearly causing her to drop her burdens. Who are you? I am here to aid you, he replied, his voice soft as the rustle of leaves. Walks with Wind sent me. He is in Dusty Gulch. He intends to guide you and your sisters home. Daisy's legs threatened to buckle. Tears coursed down her face, mingling with the grit that coated her skin. Home, she breathed, her voice barely audible. Truly home. The warrior inclined his head. But we must act quickly. The longer we linger, the greater the threat. He relieved her of the buckets, his movements fluid and efficient. Come. We must bring you to Walks with Wind. Back at Hemlock's hovel, Lily bided her time until the snores reached a particularly thunderous peak. Then she gingerly eased the door ajar, the rusted hinges emitting a mournful groan. She stilled, listening intently for any indication that Hemlock had stirred, but the rhythmic snoring continued unabated. Taking a steadying breath, she stole out into the night. Hugging the shadows, she flitted between the shacks, her gaze darting around, alert for any sign of danger. She reached the shack confining Rose, a ramshackle structure owned by a curmudgeonly aged miner named Jebediah. Peering through a knothole, she saw Rose huddled on a heap of tattered rags in the corner, her slight form shivering. Jebediah was sprawled in a chair, snoring lustily, a half-empty bottle of rotgut clutched in his fist. Lily rapped gently on the wall. Rose's head shot up, her eyes wide with apprehension. Lily gestured for her to come closer. Rose crept to the wall, her gaze locking with Lily's through the aperture. Walks with Wind is here, Lily breathed. He has come to liberate us. Rose's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? Yes, Lily urged. But you must be silent. Jebediah is sleeping, though he is easily roused. Can you slip past him? Rose regarded the slumbering miner, then back at Lily. She nodded, her small face resolute. Rose had always possessed the strongest spirit. Taking a calming breath, Rose crawled silently across the floorboards. Her petite stature worked to her advantage, enabling her to move undetected in the dim interior. She reached the portal, her hand poised above the latch. She glanced back at Jebediah, his snores still reverberating within the dwelling. With a final, silent invocation, she lifted the latch and slipped into the darkness. Lily clasped her hand, and together they fled, standing for freedom. A charged atmosphere vibrated in the air, nothing to do with the brewing storm clouds. Instead, it was the palpable anger emanating from the hastily assembled group of miners clogging the dirt street. Lily, peering from the saloon's shadowed entrance, caught her breath. Walks with Wind, mounted on his striking paint horse, remained immobile. He was an unyielding figure, carved from stone and determination. His gaze fixed as the miners, dragged from their whiskey bottles and poker games, brandished an assortment of rifles and shotguns. "Just what in blazes is this about, Walks with Wind?" roared a burly miner, his face reddened with fury and cheap liquor. "You think you can swagger in here and just take what ain't yours?" A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd, a blend of growls and veiled threats. Lily spotted unease flickering in some eyes, quickly suppressed by posturing and the audacity born of numbers. Walks with Wind's Cheyenne companions stood like statues, their faces unreadable, their hands hovering near their knives. The horses shifted restlessly, sensing the precarious balance. Walks with Wind raised a hand, silencing the growing unrest with a commanding gesture and authority forged through years of leadership. His voice, when it came, possessed the raw power of a gale, sweeping across the street, quieting the clinking spurs and grumbled objections. "We reclaim what was plundered," he stated, his words precise and measured. "We recover what was unjustly seized. These girls were orphaned, vulnerable, and you." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the gathered men, each shrinking under his unwavering appraisal. "You exploited their circumstances. You traded them as you would livestock. You shattered sisterly bonds, ripping apart the very fabric of kinship." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Some squirmed, their gazes fixed on the dusty ground. Others remained defiant, clutching their weapons tighter. They were bought and paid for, fair and square, the thick-necked miner insisted, though the bluster had faded from his voice. "We got bills of sale. Worthless scraps," Walks with Wind scoffed, a curl of distaste on his lips. "Written promises built upon a foundation of deceit and avarice. Paper cannot justify the destruction of a child's spirit. Paper cannot repair a fractured family. Paper cannot erase the stain of wrongdoing." Hope surged through Lily. His words resonated, piercing the callous hearts of these men, reminding them of the humanity they had buried beneath their greed. "We ain't done nothing illegal," another miner cried, his voice cracking with apprehension. "They were just helping out, earning their keep." Walks with Wind's gaze locked onto the speaker. "Helping out? By scrubbing floors until their hands are raw? By cooking and cleaning for men who treat them as less than chattel? Is that your warped definition of assistance?" The miner stammered, unable to meet the chief's piercing eyes. The silence lengthened, thick and oppressive, broken only by the snorts of the horses and the distant shriek of a hawk riding the thermals. Then Walks with Wind spoke again, his tone softer now, but no less forceful. "Search your souls," he implored. "Remember what it means to be human. Remember the significance of kinship, the importance of empathy. These girls deserve a chance at joy, a chance to be together, a chance to live free from dread and exploitation." He paused, allowing his words to take root. Then, with a subtle shift in his stance, he delivered his final declaration. "We are here to guarantee they receive that opportunity. We will not tolerate any obstruction." The Cheyenne warriors adjusted their positions, their hands now resting on their bows, a stark warning. The thick-necked miner spat a wad of tobacco into the dirt. "Curse you, Walks with Wind," he muttered, but the defiance was gone. He lowered his rifle, and one by one, the others followed suit. Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd began to dissipate, their swagger replaced by simmering resentment. They offered weak excuses, blaming the whiskey, the oppressive heat, anything but their own consciences. As the last of the miners skulked away, casting wary glances over their shoulders, Walks with Wind turned toward Lily. A fleeting smile touched his lips. "It is finished," he said. "They will cause no further distress." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, tears of profound relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for championing liberty. A new home on the plains. From the saloon's shadowed threshold, Lily watched the Cheyenne prepare their departure, dust devils dancing around her worn boots. The miners, a silent tableau of resentment and shame, offered a similar, brooding observance. Wind, a figure of quiet authority upon his striking paint horse, scanned the disgruntled crowd, his gaze unwavering. A single nod from him initiated a fluid, almost imperceptible shift amongst his warriors. Daisy and Rose, entwined like young vines, were lifted onto a docile mare, their expressions betraying both trepidation and a spark of exhilaration. A wave of protectiveness surged through Lily. She was determined to safeguard their future. Accepting the reins of a solid bay, she inhaled deeply. The clean, sharp fragrance of sage and pine, a stark contrast to the stale miasma of whiskey and unwashed bodies clinging to Dusty Gulch, filled her lungs. Casting one last glance at the decaying buildings, Lily steered her horse after Wind. The Cheyenne formed a living bulwark around them, their expressions inscrutable, their movements poetry in motion. The steady cadence of hooves against the parched earth became a rhythmic pulse, a beckoning toward renewal. As they left Dusty Gulch shrinking behind them, a fleeting ache for what was dissolved into a profound sense of liberation and anticipated joy. The journey tested their endurance, yet the Cheyenne exhibited unwavering patience and profound kindness. They shared their meager stores of food, patiently introducing the sisters to the lilting cadence of their language, and spun enthralling tales of their heritage, their bond with the land echoing in every syllable. Lily, an eager student, absorbed their knowledge. Initially shy, Daisy and Rose gradually blossomed, their laughter ringing out across the expansive plains. Days dissolved into starlit nights as they journeyed further from Dusty Gulch's suffocating grasp. The terrain morphed, transforming from arid waste to undulating hills draped in emerald grasses. The air grew crisp and invigorating, the sky expanded in an endless vista, the stars blazed with unparalleled brilliance. Lily experienced a release she'd never known, an authentic sense of liberty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Cheyenne encampment revealed itself, a sanctuary nestled within a sheltered valley embraced by towering cottonwoods and a meandering river. Teepees, adorned with elaborate designs, dotted the landscape, their plumes of smoke ascending like whispered prayers. The air thrummed with life, the delighted shrieks of playing children, the melodic hum of women's songs, the hypnotic pulse of drums. As they approached, the Cheyenne emerged from their dwellings, their faces reflecting both curiosity and heartfelt welcome. Women hastened to greet the sisters, their gazes soft with understanding. Children shyly presented wildflowers, their smiles radiant. Lily, her throat tight with emotion, was overwhelmed by their genuine warmth and open-heartedness. They were gifted with their own teepee, a spacious haven embellished with exquisite beadwork. The women imparted wisdom on preparing traditional Cheyenne fare, the art of tanning hides, and the skillful stitching of ornate patterns onto clothing. The men taught them horsemanship, hunting techniques, and, above all, respect for the delicate balance of the natural world. Daisy and Rose flourished in this nurturing environment. Their days were filled with camaraderie with the other children, mastering the nuances of the Cheyenne tongue and excelling in the art of beadwork. Lily observed them with a blend of maternal pride and profound thankfulness, marveling at their remarkable resilience and seamless adaptation to this novel existence. Lily herself found solace and inspiration in the wisdom and inner strength of the Cheyenne women. They generously shared their accumulated knowledge, their ancestral narratives, and their cherished traditions. She learned of the paramount importance of family, the strength of community, and the sacred reverence for nature. She discovered the restorative properties of indigenous herbs and the deeply ingrained spiritual connection to the land. She also learned about the endurance of the Cheyenne people, an admirable quality they possessed. Wind, despite the demands of his leadership role, consistently carved out time for the sisters. He illuminated their understanding of Cheyenne history, their core beliefs, and their deeply ingrained values. He expounded upon the significance of honor, unwavering courage, and genuine compassion. He shared captivating tales of his forebears, their epic struggles, and their remarkable triumphs. One evening, as they sat bathed in the warm glow of a crackling fire, Wind turned his gaze towards Lily, saying, "You are Cheyenne now. This is your sanctuary." Her heart overflowing with gratitude, Lily looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for rescuing us. Thank you for providing us with a home." Wind offered a gentle smile. "You rescued yourselves," he countered. "You possess an indomitable spirit, Lily. You are courageous beyond measure. And you are deeply loved." As days bled into weeks and weeks evolved into months, Lily, Daisy, and Rose became fully assimilated into the vibrant fabric of the Cheyenne community. Their fluency in the Cheyenne language grew effortlessly, they skillfully mastered the intricate Cheyenne crafts, and they wholeheartedly embraced the Cheyenne way of life. They discovered a profound sense of belonging, a clear purpose, and the unconditional love of family, elements that had been tragically absent in their past. No longer were they merely orphaned souls, adrift and vulnerable. They were Cheyenne now, strong, resilient, and cherished. They had finally unearthed a place to call home amidst the vast, embracing plains.